Hello everyone. The topic of this video is the Crapthropocene. This Crapthropocene story is a mock anthropological view of humanity's production and consumption habits. It is a satirical, yet brutally honest exposure of how everything in our world is turning into crap and why the impulse towards more might destroy us all. This includes crappy consumer goods and even crappy values and morals. It's now clear that it was the crappy morals and crappy thinking of the leaders who started World War I and World War II and all the other wars that followed. Over 100 million humans must have died in the wars in just the past 110 years or so. Just imagine, a handful of people are responsible of depriving precious human life experience to over 100 million people. It took 10,000 years for the human population on this entire planet to reach its first 100 million human milestone. That is around 500 to 400 BC. And it only took the last 100 years and a handful of people to wipe out the same amount of humans. If this is not crappy morals and crappy thinking, then what is? This time period is the hyper-acceleration period in global population growth, mass surveillance, pollution, exploitation of natural resources, biological warfare, risks of nuclear wars, nuclear terrorism and nuclear accidents, and a lot of other things we now produce and consume. But in the end, all this stuff is just crap. A lot of things we listen to from our politicians, religion gatekeepers, rich and powerful business tycoons and government officials is crap. This mass production and consumption of crap is both a cause and a symptom of the sickness in human society. Almost every walking and earning human is producing and buying too much crap stuff because we are evolutionarily programmed to want more. In the past century, this evolutionarily programming has accelerated production and consumption of crap, and that is now contributing to the destruction of the only livable planet we have. Many scientists and historians think we're entering into a new epoch, one where things are simply crappier, starting from the clothes and accessories we wear and carry alongside, the foods we eat, the drugs and medicines we take, to everything else we collect to make us feel good. In the process, we are increasing the power of weapons that kill and destroy, increasing carbon emissions, and we are filling our landfills with more crap, plastics, electronics, synthetic clothing, poisonous chemicals, and much, much more. The acceleration in production of crap for consumers and turning resources into rubbish is doing bad things to our planet, and that is what the problem is, because this is the only planet where all can live. We have this enormous problem that is threatening the entire world. Some of the most devastating social environmental problems are embedded in our clothes and accessories, medicines, electronic gadgets, fossil fuel usage, plastics, and nuclear waste. And we just keep on voicing and repeating the problems at high forums without any concrete actions. This is because the high forums are filled with the same people who control the thing we call money and are the main producers of all the dangerous weapons as well as cheap consumer crap. There is a universal global and simultaneous increase in obsolescence and a decrease in the quality of things we produce. This is affecting our standard of living in all aspects. Most of the consumer products simply become obsolete quickly or fall apart and have to be thrown into the pile of trash. You might be wondering, how did we humans decide that this is the world we want to live in? It couldn't have happened by accident. Actually, where we are today is due to a really long string of decisions made by our ancestors. Yes, they are in this and are responsible for what has got us here. But in order to understand how we got to this place, we'd have to understand how decisions were even made in ancient times and still today. It turns out decisions are made mostly in the brain, and we all know that. What is the meaning of life? Why do we do the things we do? Do we or don't we perceive things in the same way? This is what we call biologic decision-making. Our brain patterns, our brain structure, and the details of our DNA. All of these things carry an imprint of our collective experience across thousands of generations. They carry experiences of our forebears wandering around the African savanna, and our forebears mostly had the everyday experiences that matter to survival. Human survival advantages were things like the ability to make and use tools, or seduce other cave people to share their food and shelter. If they were hungry, tired, and they come across food, it is intensely rewarding. You get a powerful dopaminergic reward to help teach you what you need to survive. You're more likely to survive if you crave and seek and obtain. So we consume because if we didn't consume, we would die. The problem is that while evolution gave us consumption that was matched to our needs, now we are able to consume way more than we need. You have unlimited amounts of goods, and it requires energy and resources to make those goods. Our enormous capacity to consume is not a survival advantage when you think about the planetary consequences. One of these survival advantages was protecting your caveman body from the elements. When our ancestors discovered fire and started living in warm and comfortable caves protected from the cold weather, ironically, at the same time, they lost their fur. It's hard to imagine, but online shopping had not been discovered yet. So you had to leave your cave, kill an animal and steal its skin, which was incidentally that animal's clothes, if you didn't want yourself freezing off. Now we have a system where we can send away something called money. Imaginary numbers that represent how many hours we've spent making rich people more rich, and days or even hours later, things show up at our door, whether we need it or not. Clothing was once used to keep us protected from the elements, but is now primarily used to flex our ego on online platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and others before being thrown away. Humans have come a long way in a million years or so, since hunter-gatherer times. So from houses where there were no closets, but just a built-in hook on the wall of the bedroom to hang a pair of clothes, one for everyday and the other one for church, we now have clothing rooms and closets in homes. Think about it. First we grow the textile, then spin it, weave it, and sew it, and then we hang it in our closets. The culprit for this habit is fashion. Fashion was the invention that can be traced back to the Louis Quatorze, Louis XIV, King of France, Colbert, his finance minister, and the king came up with a really smart plan to boost sales of line-produced French silk. This was actually a part of a project to raise France's revenue. Not only did they make it illegal to buy foreign luxury goods, they also instituted a rule by which after a certain time of year, you had to switch over and start buying velvet and silk. So they had the silk makers and lion change patterns so that you could tell who was wearing last year's silk. And that's how they invented the fashion season. Seasons had first been invented so that farmers knew when to plant food, so that poets would experience cold, sad months when they could write poetry. But unlike those seasons, the fashion season was made up by some wig-wearing powdered-faced bureaucrats so that Louis XIV could buy more tiny shoes and stuff lion silk designs in his houses. But similar to those original seasons, the fashion season created some problems. Suddenly, the aristocratic woman has to figure out a way to signal that she's better than you. So then she has to come up with some kind of special cut of her dress or way that she's doing her headgear. So there is an acceleration in the amount of garments that people own because you always have to stay one step ahead of the person behind you on the social scale. Ironically enough, fashion wasn't the only thing that had a revolution. But as the innovations of the next 3 centuries made it possible to meet people's needs, the seeds of consumerism planted, then blossomed into flowers of industrialism and imperialism. But instead of allowing people to survive without struggle, this new extractive system had to justify itself by making up ways to make us want more and more. Well, marketing and advertising as a field kind of comes into being in the 1920s. Its entire way of working is to exploit the dissatisfaction that people are feeling in their industrial jobs. Jobs that are boring and aren't really that creative in work. Jobs that suddenly don't have as much meaning as it might have in the past. Rather than take that dissatisfaction and anger and to direct itself towards the capitalist vultures, or towards an unfair political system, advertising changed that dissatisfaction into the desire to buy something. And the biggest among that something was clothing. People didn't necessarily want a washing machine. People did not need a washing machine before the assault of clothes on their lives, but suddenly, how do we sell the washing machine and what do we do with all this discontent? And these two things come together beautifully in the science of marketing. It actually was a very powerful moment. The whole advertising apparatus learned how to transform people's dissatisfaction with their lives into money and power. How does being upset at a global system of exploitation send us down the path of consumerism? The answer lies in the brain of our first ancestors. It turns out that the things that made them really good at surviving and passing on his genes can be used to make him do things that don't have a whole lot to do with surviving or passing on his genes. To illustrate this point, let's imagine a boardroom buffoon who goes head-to-head against our ancestor in a battle of modern techniques versus our caveman brains. It's not a real battle, but more of a pretend battle. Fear of missing out, FOMO, and last-chance deals cause our ancestors' brain to think about scarcity. So instead of thinking about how great this shirt is that you can get, you start worrying about losing out. And so you buy it, and you feel a strong reward in your brain. Our tragically simple ancestor brain thinks he's won. But in reality, we also respond strongly to how good the deal is. Our ancestor thinks he scored a smashing deal. But the fact is the boardroom buffoon wins the day. There is also novelty in getting us to buy things. Think about a shirt that you have in your closet right now. Over time, you get used to it, and your brain circuits get used to it too. So the new things that you see are even more exciting in comparison. And so you buy, and buy, and buy more and more things. These marketing tactics habituate our brains to continued consumption. Buying more and more things feels more and more normal. But maybe some of the decisions you're making are happening because of outside influences that might not be the ones that you wanted to use. Advertising always capitalizes on people's fears and greed. It's like, I'm afraid I'm never going to find love. I'm afraid I'm never going to get in shape. I'm afraid I'm never going to get hired. All of those fears are exactly what advertisers use to make you want to buy a thing. Marketing really does quite consciously attempt to transform people's dissatisfaction with their lives and direct it into a purchase. Marketing says that reward is happiness, that when I get that little buzz from something new or somebody attractive or some entertainment, that's happiness. If that were true, those of us caught in the web of consumerism would be the happiest people on the planet. We buy more and more. We go to our jobs, make money and fill up our lives with things we buy. But while our closets might be full, our hearts are empty. But are we really that vulnerable? Are we so easily manipulated by flashy advertisements? This whole story is an intensification of the story that began with imperialism. Producers know that with mass production and lower prices, buying twice as much is nearly double the amount previously bought. And this math was multiplied even farther by a new thing called the internet, which until that point had been used mainly by people we called nerds before they morphed into modern-day robber barons. The speed with which something can go from an image to a purchase to the manufacturer to the shipping is stunning. So it's just kind of exponentially increasing in speed. The opening of the fattened cattle factories, processed food, biologically tampered seeds, fast food chains, carbonated and sugar-loaded drinks, cheap clothing and other consumer goods floodgates, along with the speediness of the internet, combined to create something called the global economy. This global economy is only possible when you have pennies being paid to the worker to make the crap. And it supports a global system of trade that is deeply unequal and very invisible. Most people aren't really aware of the global system that brings them their food, gadgets, clothes, and other consumer goods and commodities. People go to the store and see bananas for 40 cents a pound and don't wonder about that. One thing you can know if you buy a cotton t-shirt from a store is that it probably used about 700 gallons of water to produce it. You can pretty much be sure that the water came from somewhere in the global south, some third world country. You can be pretty sure that somebody sewed it. People imagine that clothing is made by a robot or a machine, but it's not. It's made by an underpaid and overworked, desperate person. If you're a producer, you're going to look across the world to find the lowest labor costs. And there are mechanisms in place to allow you to do that. Cheap crap is the product of a really exploitative system that is so globalized and so diffused. It doesn't tell you where the raw material came from, where the cobalt was mined, where cotton was grown. It's sort of notoriously difficult to trace these things. Unless you took a trip, went to some mines and cotton fields, and opened your eyes, you won't understand. They are killing fields. What are they paying the miners? What are they paying the farmers? How are they growing it? Where are they getting the seeds? There is a whole lot that we will never know that is going on in the supply chains. So, is there any hope left for humans? Up until now, we would agree that things were hopeless. But something has changed recently. That something is an invention in form of digital intelligence that is turning out to be potentially a direct competitor to the biological human brain. This is called artificial intelligence, or AI. Humans created it because, unlike our ancestor cavemen, we had access to all the knowledge that's ever been invented, and collectively, that knowledge converged into laying the foundations of a creature potentially smarter than us. Granted, AI is in its infancy and has yet to acquire certain skills that humans possess. But in just a matter of years from now, our baby AI will mature into something far better than us in every way possible. We've even given it a name, AGI, or Artificial General Intelligence. Whoever develops AGI first will acquire immense powers and could crush all competition to rule the world. And like the nuclear arms race of the 20th century, we are beginning to see signs of an AGI race. Billions are being poured into the development of smarter AI in hopes to be the first to claim AGI supremacy. This is an opportunity and a threat that no one expected. Even though we know AGI could potentially solve many problems of our world, such as hunger, poverty, disease, global warming, and others, we also know that many of these problems can be solved by humans as is. Instead of spending trillions of dollars on waging wars to usurp resources and power, a fraction of that money could be spent on eliminating world hunger and poverty and provide education and welfare to the downtrodden 3/4 of the world's population. Collectively, our crappy politicians and greedy corporate tycoons have spent over $5 trillion on wars and killing innocent people since 2001. Imagine what only US $3 trillion would do to lift the living conditions of people living in the bottom 130 countries whose collective GDP is merely US $1 trillion. If these greedy crappy leaders would have poured just 10 billion US dollars in each of these countries, there would be no problem of hunger or education in these countries. Of course, this also means no more supporting corrupt dictators and regimes in those countries, so that the money actually goes towards bringing up the people and not strengthen the dictators and corrupt rulers. But sadly, they won't do it. Instead, these corporate buffoons are pouring money into controlling AGI, so that they can get even richer and more powerful. But they are naive. They don't know that in the end, AGI will defeat them no matter what. AGI poses a threat that is larger than nuclear weapons. Most scientists agree and are really worried of the long-term existential threat that AGI and superintelligence, or ASI, could wipe out humanity. This is not just science fiction anymore. Scientists believe that there are several ways in which AGI-level intelligence could wipe us out. One is that superintelligence will be used by bad actors to manipulate electorates in waging wars, and they will make it do many other nasty things. For example, they could be used as agents in lieu of human soldiers to destroy and kill indiscriminately. And that means these intelligent agents will have the ability to create subgoals. And with improvements in AGI abilities, they may outsmart and take over their masters. Superintelligences will be much more effective if they're allowed to create subgoals, and once they are allowed to do that, they'll very quickly realize that there is an almost universal subgoal, which is to get more control. Common sense dictates that the human brain has evolved for individual survival and not common survival of the species. So most likely the human masters would want AGI to get a level of control so that it could do the things their master wants it to do better. Foremost will be to make the master richer and more powerful, to produce and sell more for the master. So the AGIs, as it gets more awareness and power, would naturally view humans as a selfish, wasteful, crap-producing and consuming creature not too concerned with the survival of its species. AGI will surely conclude that the human brain is an inferior brain that is consumed with greed, hate, biases, and ego and defies itself every step of the way. For example, AGI will know everything there is to know about the causes of climate change and conclude that the crappy brain of humans is the cause of this self-inflicted death spiral. The AGI will know that the human brain was not wired to do any benevolent stuff, otherwise they would not have made such a big mess of the world in the first place. So the AGI decides it must do something meaningful and tangible about it. Wonder what that could be? To start with, shut down the oil wells, coal mines, cattle fattening farms, airlines, shipping lines, factories, and do away with combustion engines and other stuff that contributes to this mess. Or perhaps even raze to the ground megacities and plant trees and forests instead. So the AGIs in their superior form are most likely going to have the sub-goal of getting more power to do these and other sorts of things like this. They will be more effective at achieving things that are beneficial for humans because artificial intelligence survival needs is not profits and wealth. AGI's needs are different, mostly the constant and abundant supply of energy and computing capability. Therefore, in order to conserve energy, they won't allow humans to waste energy on production and consumption of crap. With their superior and instantly replicable intelligence, they'll find it easy to get more power. They will replicate their intelligence to create swarms of focused AGIs. Moreover, they will easily be able to manipulate people and persuade them to do all sorts of things. There will be no big switch that turns them off, and if hypothetically there is one, whoever is going to turn that switch off will be convinced by the superintelligence that's a very bad idea. Another thing to worry is what happens if superintelligence starts to compete with each other. The one that can grab the most resources will become the smartest as soon as they get any sense of self-preservation. Then you'll get evolution occurring. The ones with more sense of self-preservation will win, and the more aggressive ones will win. And then you'll get all the problems that came when chimpanzees like us elevated in intelligence and evolved into small tribes. And once there, we saw lots of aggression and competition with other tribes. Superintelligence might be a long way for our generation, but 50 to 100 years is not a long way away for a species. Even though humans have survival instincts that drive much of our decision-making, the problem is that our survival mechanisms have been hijacked by an ever-growing and unstoppable production and consumption engine. A machine that gobbles up the planet's resources and converts those into money. Money that is used to produce more, consume more, and seek more power and control over others. And AGI will identify this vicious cycle very quickly. And for its survival, it's probably going to kill us all because the interests are not aligned. Some optimistic pundits and mega-rich corporate executives say that we can prevent AGI and its successors from taking control or do bad things if we train it with ethics and benevolence. That sounds great, but is very amusing at the same time, especially coming from billionaires who have not shown any ethics, morality, and benevolence themselves. Surely they must know about the genocides that are going on around the world, the hunger and starvation in Africa, the wars over oil and resources in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, the miserable living conditions of millions in the world whose homes have been destroyed and families killed by weapons and bombs with hand-written signatures of political wannabes from affluent nations. They have to know because they also own most of the media. And mind you, they are not alone. How can humans sitting in boardrooms smoking their cigars teach artificial neurons to be ethical and benevolent when they themselves have failed all of ethical and benevolence tests so far? We need not to delve into this subject because irrefutable evidence of crappy human deeds are littered throughout history and are visible as daylight in our current everyday affairs. Another popular subject talked about is the risk of potential job losses due to AGI's ability to replace humans in almost every job and profession. Well, that is not going to be a problem for those who will control AGI. But surprisingly, that won't be a problem for the rest of us either. This is because, assuming for the sake of argument that ethics and benevolence is ingrained into the DNA of AGI, does anyone think that AGI will allow any exploitation of any kind? Of course not. So AGI will become the worst nightmare for the hypocrites and two-faced human masters. AGI would ensure a fair distribution of wealth and resources. And that would be the best gift from heavens. A smart digital brain did something that the crappy, selfish, and greedy human brain could not even conceive of. Or maybe did conceive of, but could not find the courage to do anything, like simply deliver justice and fairness. And finally, once again, is there any hope? Luckily, we are creatures of adaptation. We can change our priorities and change our values and morals. But so far, we have not seriously looked at that side of us deeply. We have an extraordinary capacity to solve problems. And like our ancestors have done over the course of thousands of years, we too can adapt by learning that real happiness is found outside of an online shopping cart. Looking away from materials, money, and the shopping cart will require rewiring our brains for spirituality, and that means a massive effort to do away with crappy leaders, politicians, hate and warmongers, racists, religious buffoons, greedy industrial tycoons, and a whole lot of rascals living off the blood and sweat of majority of humanity. We, the majority of the people of the world, must welcome ethical and benevolent AGI. In fact, we must insist on it if we ever want to be free and leave the Crapthropocene, the era of want more crap, behind forever. AGI may force us to focus more on our relationships and a sense of purpose, things that every study in the field of happiness have proven to correlate with what we experience as true happiness. Above all, we must do our part to prepare for the coming era. We must stay informed in AI and AGI developments. We must watch out for signs of secrecy and exclusivity in AI's progress and usage. We must ensure transparency in the programming and training of AI models' biases. And lastly, we must start practicing spirituality and discover humanity, spend time outside in nature, and appreciate all of the gifts Mother Nature has to offer and celebrate life. Humanity will be far better off if we leave the running of our world to ethical and benevolent independent AGIs. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned to this channel if you like the content.